It is Tuesday, April 8th, and let's talk about our love for the game. And welcome into another episode of the Love for the Game podcast. I'm your host, Reed Napper. Thank you for joining us today. Before we begin, just want to give a quick shout out for all the love and support you guys have been showing for the podcast as of late. I had to take a little break as I was adjusting to a new job that I just started. So I appreciate all the love and support you guys have been showing up to this point. Remember to follow us on X, Instagram, and TikTok at LFTGPod01. And remember to like, comment, and subscribe to the YouTube channel and on Apple Podcasts. Today, we have a huge episode coming up for you guys. We'll be discussing some notable spring games that will be coming up this weekend all around the country, from Louisville all the way to UNC, Tennessee, Notre Dame, Florida, Ohio State, Alabama. A bunch of notable spring games, or at least what is left of spring games. We will be discussing and breaking down some key question marks and what I'll be looking out for relative to those games, all coming up on this episode of Love for the Game. I can't wait for this weekend of spring games, or at least what is relatively a new landscape for spring games. Some schools opting to go with spring practices or scrimmages, not full on like spring games, splitting the squads in half and stuff like that. So, and at least we'll get some intel on these spring games and what occurs in them. Some of them won't even be televised, most likely. So we'll have to scour the internet, scour Twitter for some updates and what comes out of these spring games and practices. But let's start with Louisville, occurring on Friday night at 7:00. And the biggest question I have coming into this spring game, or at least this session of practice for Louisville, is how has Miller Moss, been looking? Miller Moss coming through the transfer portal to Louisville. Did take some losses at USC. Wasn't the greatest tenure, I'd say. Wasn't the greatest experience for him at USC, and decided to transfer out of there to a completely new environment, a different scope, a complete 180, honestly, to Louisville, who has been in contention the last few seasons in the ACC. And Jeff Brohm, taking a lot of portal talent the last few seasons, and he's been relatively successful with it. I believe they finished with 9 wins last season, 9 or 10 wins. And Louisville continuing to be on an upward trajectory, I would say. And the biggest question for me is how Miller Moss will fare in this new environment and a new offensive system. And can Jeff Brohm continue to show his prowess in how he acquires talent through the transfer portal and bring Louisville into the ACC contention, possibly? A lot of notable portal acquisitions, and will they be able to have an immediate impact on that program? Will it be notable? Will it be noticeable through the spring game that they have on Friday? Those are the biggest questions for me surrounding Louisville. But obviously the biggest one, Miller Moss, quarterback transferring from USC into Louisville. How will he look? How will he fare in a more competitive environment? Saturday could really start to feel like a fall Saturday with all the notable teams we have holding their spring games or simulated practices with scrimmages and stuff like that. Next up on our list is LSU. Now, LSU has already announced that they'll be having a simulated practice. They won't actually have a official spring game, but they will be having fans in the stadium and everything. So it'll be basically like a fan appreciation day while they hold a practice with some simulated court. I believe they'll be simulating a first half and then like an accelerated clock through the second half. This will occur at 10:30 on Saturday. 10:30. I think that's Central Time for LSU in Louisiana. So the biggest question for LSU for me coming into this spring game, at least from how reports have been coming out during spring camp, is how does the newer incoming talent fare around the older returning talent and the more savvy veteran players that they've acquired out of the transfer portal. Most notably, Nick Anderson, wide receiver, new target for Garrett Nussmeier on the outside, has allegedly been impressing through spring camp so far. So it's definitely been the most notable acquisition so far for LSU in their transfer portal class to this point. Another standout has been defensive lineman Ahmad Burrow. He continues to be a solid defensive tackle. He's going to be a senior this year, and he's continued to be a focal point for LSU's defense up to this point through camp. But again, as I've said time and time again on this show, how Brian Kelly, I believe, needs to get over the hump. Honestly, this is a make or break season for him. And especially with a quarterback with the talent of Garrett Nussmeier, he's already had Jaden Daniels run through that program and essentially didn't really exceed to the expectations that roster could have reached, with a quarterback of that caliber. So the biggest question for me, how does Brian Kelly finally get over the hump? How does this roster improve? How do they continue to adapt to his culture down there at LSU? And yeah. Next up, the reigning defending national champion Ohio State Buckeyes. They will be kicking off at, guess what, noon. Yeah, noon on Saturday. Of course, Ohio State always plays at noon. Might be on Big Ten Network, honestly, because, that's a Fox entity. But anyway, Ohio State spring game at noon. There's one simple question with Ohio State surrounding the quarterback position, between Keenholz and Julian Sayin, Lincoln Keenholz and Julian Sayin. And the biggest question for me is between either quarterback, and both of the quarterbacks here have been slinging the pill. They have been dueling through spring camp so far, and both of them have looked really good up to this point. Ryan Day, quote, has said that they are neck and neck with each other, so not one or the other has really stood out from one another. But really, the biggest question is, who is the better quarterback to get Jeremiah Smith the ball? That's the whole offense. If you can get Jeremiah Smith the ball the most effectively, and Carnell Tate, who ended up staying there and not transferring out, who is now the number 2 wide receiver, who is the best quarterback to get them the ball? Because Jeremiah Smith is your whole offense. Jeremiah Smith, along with other key players on the team last year, essentially carried them to a national championship. So that's the biggest question for Ohio State, whether it's Lincoln Keenholz or Julian Sayin. Both have been phenomenal through camp so far. I've watched a couple clips of them that I've seen on Twitter. They've both been playing really well throughout camp so far, and Ryan Day seems to agree with that. So honestly, whoever is the better quarterback to get Jeremiah Smith the ball, that is who's going to be starting for Ohio State. That is the biggest question mark for me surrounding the Buckeyes going into the spring game. If you're still listening or watching on YouTube up to this point, I really appreciate it. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe on the YouTube channel, and follow us over on X, Instagram, and TikTok at LFTGPod01. All comments and feedback are much appreciated. Remember to also subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts at Love for the Game. All listens and feedback over there are greatly appreciated as well. And as we continue on here, we have the Alabama Crimson Tide. Their spring game will be kicking off at 1 o'clock on Saturday. And relatively the same question as Ohio State. Who will be the best quarterback possible to get Ryan Williams the ball? He's their biggest playmaker. Jeremy Bernard also had a fantastic season there, but he is no longer there. So really the biggest question is, who's the better quarterback to get Ryan Williams the ball? A quote from offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb, newly appointed offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb. Quote, I think we have 3 really good quarterbacks, and I mean that. I don't think anybody has separated themselves. Whether it's Keelan Russell or Mack, whoever ends up being the quarterback at Alabama this coming season, and whoever is rolling with the ones in the scrimmage, honestly, who is the best quarterback to get Ryan Williams the ball? He's your best playmaker. He's your best offensive weapon. He's going to be the focal point of the offense. So realistically, whoever is the best quarterback to get Ryan Williams the ball, I think is on track to be the starter for Alabama. I think quarterback play is the biggest question for Alabama, honestly, because Jalen Milroe was such an up and down signal caller last season for the Crimson Tide, and I just believe if they had a little bit better quarterback play, had a couple more plays go their way that surrounded the quarterback position, I do believe that Alabama could have been potentially in the deeper playoff discussion, solidified playoff team. And yeah, that's the biggest question for Alabama. Who will be the quarterback? Who will be the best option to get Ryan Williams the ball? Staying in the state of Alabama, we will have the Auburn Tigers coming up next. They will also be kicking off at 1 o'clock on Saturday. And the biggest question for me for Auburn coming into the season, notable transfer of Jackson Arnold from Oklahoma and a couple of elite wide receivers on the outside for him, Cam Coleman notably and Eric Singleton. Transfer from Georgia Tech. Notably, how will Jackson Arnold be able to connect with his elite receivers in a game-like setting? I know they've had like scrimmages and practice and stuff like that in 11 on 11 and 7 on 7 and stuff like that. But in a full 11 on 11 game environment, I would say, how will he be able to connect with his receivers? Will it translate from the practice field into Jordan Hare? Will it translate from his time at Oklahoma that last season, where he had consistent turning over the ball, miscues, errors, stuff like that. I do believe he'll have better offensive line play at Auburn than in Oklahoma, but time will obviously tell with that. Will he be able to stay upright and not get put on his back every other play? So that's the biggest question for Auburn coming into the spring game for me is how will Jackson Arnold look in a game-like setting? And will he be able to hook up with his elite receivers and Cam Coleman and Eric Singleton early and often, honestly? Just keep feeding them the ball. They are your best players. They are your if Auburn's going to find success this season, they need to do it through those two guys. So that's the biggest question for Auburn coming into their spring game. Quickly moving on to the Florida Gators. They have a 1 o'clock start time as well. DJ Lagway, focal point of that offense, standout quarterback for the Gators last season when he got playing time. And will DJ Lagway be able to carry that hype into season 2? I do believe so. I believe he has the pedigree and the talent worthy of having Florida back in contention this season, at least within the SEC, I do believe. Some updates on Lagway. He's been in and out of practice throughout the spring, but they had a scrimmage the other day. I think that was on Saturday. I did read that they had a scrimmage, and as soon he got a couple reps with the ones, and you could easily, according to reports, you could easily tell that once he did take control of that offense, there was a higher gear. There was more efficiency. There was more like a pep in the step. It was more up tempo. And Lagway had a real command of that offense from what reports were saying. But a couple of receivers were also standing out for him in that scrimmage. Aiden Mizell, alongside J. Michael Sturdivant, who is an incoming transfer from UCLA. A couple of standout receivers throughout that scrimmage that they had the other day. And flipping over the other side of the ball, a notable cornerback, Cormani McClain, transferred in from Colorado. When he first got to Florida, there were a couple issues off of the field that he had to deal with in the coaching staff, but he's quickly adapted to Billy Napier's culture and really picked up what the Gator culture is going to be like and playing in the SEC. And he could be on track to start, honestly, alongside of stud cornerback Devin Moore on the other side. So if Florida has the outside options on offense for DJ Lagway to be able to hook up with alongside of the outside options on defense to be able to lock down the other elite receivers within the SEC, Florida could easily be back in contention for the SEC at a minimum, if not like an outside chance at the college football playoffs. So I do believe Florida has a lot of question marks surrounding them, but from reports throughout spring so far, they've been mostly positive. And will Florida be able to bounce back after last season, carry the momentum that they had at the end of last season into this coming 2025-26 season? This spring game will be a big checkpoint off of Billy Napier's list if Florida can show signs of drastic improvement through this spring game. Sticking in the SEC, we have the Georgia Bulldogs now. Obviously, still the SEC champions from last season, but didn't get over the hump in that first playoff game against Notre Dame last season. A lot of question marks surrounding the offense, regression and run game from this season or from this past season. The most drops in the country. Carson Beck moving on to Miami. Georgia has a lot of question marks, at least on the offensive side. I don't really see them having any regression on the defensive side. I still think they'll be that Georgia defense that we've seen over the last few seasons. But a lot of the questions with Georgia right now are surrounding the offense in that side of the ball. And the biggest question mark for Georgia coming into the spring game for me is will that offense see improvement to the level that they need to get back to contention in the college football playoff at least? Or could they face a regression from that SEC championship team that they just had a year ago? A lot of players leaving, a lot of new faces, whole new quarterback, Gunnar Stockton. We've seen Carson Beck the last few seasons there having a lot of success. But if Gunnar Stockton is going to see success at Georgia, it is going to come on the shoulders of Zachariah Branch, a transfer wide receiver from USC. Early reports out of camp have said that this guy is for real. He is a dude and a game changer. He has the capability of hitting a home run almost every other play for Georgia, as reports have been coming out, and he is the real deal. He didn't really get a fair chance at USC. He got playing time, obviously, playing a lot of games there for USC. But that's a whole different environment as opposed to Georgia, a national contender every year. And Zachariah Branch has lived up to the hype in spring camp up to this point so far. So a lot of the questions surrounding Georgia's offense: will their run game improve? The receivers have obviously been performing well through camp, as with Zachariah Branch, and leading that receiver room to step it up to another level this season for quarterback Gunnar Stockton and the Bulldogs. So that's the biggest question for me, surrounding that Bulldogs offense coming into the spring game. Staying in the state of Georgia, we have the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets in the ACC. They'll be also starting their spring game at 1:00. And Georgia Tech is littered with a bunch of veteran presence, a bunch of juniors, seniors, upperclassmen. Will they be able to carry the success that they had from last season? Upsetting Florida State in the first game when they were in the top 10, upsetting Miami later in the season. Will they be able to take it up another level and compete for an ACC title? They return quarterback Haynes King. They have two standout wide receivers, both transferring from Florida International, Eric Rivers and Dean Patterson, who have been standing out throughout spring camp so far. And Haynes King also returns with running back Justice Haynes in the backfield. So, they both combined for over 1,500 rushing yards. So will Georgia Tech be able to carry their veteran success into ACC contention? And how will that veteran-led team fare through their spring game at least and going into the fall camp? That's the biggest question for me with Georgia Tech. Next up, we have the Oklahoma Sooners. Now, where do we even start with Oklahoma? The dreadful season last year for the Sooners. I believe they finished 5-7. Or 6-7, one or the other. They lost in their bowl game to Navy. But a lot of positive signs out of spring camp so far for Oklahoma. New quarterback coming in, John Mateer, along with new offensive coordinator Ben Arbuckle, both coming from Washington State. And John Mateer has apparently lived up to the hype in spring camp for Oklahoma so far. He is the real deal, as reports have been coming out. And my initial question is, how will that revamped offense look in a more game-like setting in 11-on-11, as opposed to a closed-door environment of practice? And what will Ben Arbuckle be bringing to Oklahoma? Reports have been saying that his offense has been looking fluid and has reduced the turnovers, at least from John Mateer. The decision-making has been really good up to this point. So I do believe that Oklahoma will be taking a step forward this coming season. I don't know if they'll be back at SEC championship contention level, but I definitely think there'll be a better product on the field for the Sooners coming into the season, especially with Brent Venables retaking over the defensive play calling duties. I definitely think that'll be a better step forward for the Oklahoma Sooners coming into this spring game and the fall season. Now we have the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. They will also be starting their spring game at 2 o'clock on Saturday. And the biggest question surrounding Notre Dame is who is going to be the starting quarterback coming into the season? CJ Carr and Kenny Minchie showed a lot in scrimmages that this past Saturday, notably. They've been battling it out, but Steve Angeli has been touted as a starter as of right now, and a lot of pundits around the industry believe that he is going to be the starter for Notre Dame. Led Notre Dame on a drive before halftime in the Orange Bowl against Penn State, and led to 3 points. Basically kept them in the game when it could have gotten out of hand, and eventually led Notre Dame to play for a national championship game. So a lot of question marks surrounding the quarterback position, but Steve Angeli been the notable standout. CJ Carr and Kenny Minchie, though, have been making a name for themselves at that position as well. And keep a name to remember here, Wisconsin transfer wide receiver Will Pauling apparently has been a major standout on the offensive side of the ball so far. Obviously, Jeremiah Love going to be in the mainstay of the offense, a running back returning. But he did go through a 7-on-7 period this past Saturday and got a knock on his hamstring. He was seen having a wrap on his hamstring, and there wasn't any noticeable walking issues or anything, but he did have it cautiously wrapped. So that's just something to keep an eye out for. I don't believe Jeremiah Love will be continuing at all throughout the spring. At least I wouldn't continue him throughout the spring. And then they also had an 11-on-11 period this past Saturday, and Kenny Minchie did run with the starters in that 11-on-11 period. So just something to keep an eye out for Notre Dame. Definitely a quarterback battle there going on for sure. I would pick Steve Angeli to win the job for the Fighting Irish, but that's definitely the biggest question mark for Notre Dame coming into the spring game. On to the Tennessee Volunteers, also starting their spring game at 2 o'clock on Saturday. Biggest question here, once again, the quarterback position, the most important position on the field. Can Nico Iamaleava be the catalyst to get Tennessee back to the playoffs? Losing that workhorse and losing a player of Dylan Sampson's caliber is definitely a huge loss for Tennessee. SEC Offensive Player of the Year last season, and it's definitely going to put more of the load on the Nico Iamaleava's shoulders to get Tennessee back to the levels that they played at last season. That's the biggest question mark for Tennessee coming into the spring game is how Nico will look. We've seen a couple clips of him throwing throughout practices on Twitter, and he's looked pretty good. But how will he look in a full game setting, 11-on-11? Will he be able to elevate his play to improve the play of his receivers, of his running backs, and get Tennessee back to the heights that they were at last season? So that's the biggest question surrounding Tennessee. Next, we have the Virginia Tech Hokies. Now, I view this as a make or break season for Brent Pry, honestly. At least I think Virginia Tech should be competing in the ACC. They're a powerhouse in that conference, historically. And I do believe that they should be back in the conversation, back in the driver's seat within the ACC, honestly. And the biggest question surrounding that is how the team will play under Brent Pry. Question marks surrounding the quarterback, at least right now. Kyron Drones was injured during last season and has still been injured throughout the spring camp with Pop Watson, who ended up getting some playing time for the Hokies last season. Has stated that his confidence grew from playing in those games last season and has continued throughout camp to this point. So who will be the quarterback for Virginia Tech coming into the season? And I presume Pop Watson will be playing a lot in the spring game if Kyron Jones has been hurt this spring. So that's the biggest question mark surrounding Virginia Tech coming into the spring game. Now on to the Syracuse Orange. They will be kicking off their spring game at around 3 o'clock on Saturday. And Will they be able to keep up their offensive production without Kyle McCord? That's the biggest question mark coming out of camp for Syracuse right now. Also notably, standout wide receiver and defensive back Dimitri Samuel Jr. Has worked on both sides of the ball. He enrolled early into Syracuse at only 16 years old and is now 17. He's been taking reps on both sides of the ball, but this past week, he went through a couple of drills, mainly on the defensive side of the ball at DB, getting work with head coach Fran Brown, coaching up the defensive backs. But QB coach Nunzino Campanile, I believe that's how you say it. Excuse me if I mispronounce that, but the quarterback coach for Syracuse said that all three quarterbacks have not yet really stood out to him as who's going to be running with the ones, who's going to be the starter. But he says that all three of them are super fast. So, I mean, take that as you will for the Syracuse Orange between Michael Johnson Jr., Ricky Collins, and Jakari Williams. All three quarterbacks are fast. So, I mean, positive signs for all three of them. They're fast, but none of them have really stood out enough to be named the starter at this point. So Syracuse Orange, those are the biggest question marks surrounding their spring game. And finally, the North Carolina Tar Heels under the lights at 6:30 on Saturday. And, obviously Bill Belichick, the new head coach at UNC. How will he fare in this world of college football that we are in now? How will his roster look? How will his new staff look? A bunch of new transfers coming in. How will they fare to a new staff? And the biggest question mark for me surrounding UNC is obviously how they'll play on the field in the spring game will tell me a lot about how their fall is going to go, how their season is going to go. Will there be growing pains coming with it? Will there be immediate success with it? They could end up like, I don't want to say as bad as Florida State last year, but, they have a lot of transfers coming in under a whole new coaching staff. So, there's a bunch of questions surrounding UNC. This spring game is arguably one of the most important, at least on this list for me, because just there's so much unknown about North Carolina coming into this season. So this spring game will really tell a lot for UNC, at least in my eyes, coming into this season. And that's what I believe will be the biggest talking points surrounding UNC after the spring game. And that will do it for this episode of the Love for the Game podcast. Again, I really appreciate all the love and support up to this point. Again, sorry for the long delay of an episode. As I said in the open, I started a new job recently, so I've just been trying to adjust to that new schedule. But we'll be trying to put out more content throughout spring ball and through spring camp and everything as we get into more spring games and basically more simulated practices and stuff like that. So again, I really appreciate all the love and support. Remember again to follow us on X, Instagram, and TikTok at LFTGpod01. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube and follow us on Apple Podcasts. Again, really appreciate it. Thank you for listening and have a blessed day.